She told everyone I was just temporary in her life and nothing serious. I proved her right by leaving completely. Months later, I was gone permanently while she was the one still stuck thinking about me. He's not really my boyfriend, you know. I heard that sentence from the next room. She didn't know I was standing right there. And the worst part wasn't even the words themselves. It was how easily she said them. The way she said it, like it was something rehearsed so many times it had stopped feeling like a lie and just started feeling like weather. I didn't walk in. I didn't say a word. I just stood there in her hallway, holding 2 cups of coffee I had made for both of us, listening to the woman I'd spent 8 months of my life with tell her friend that I was, essentially, nobody. Not a secret she was protecting. Not someone she was nervous to define. Nobody. What I didn't know in that hallway, standing there with 2 warm mugs and a chest full of something I couldn't name yet, was that this was the moment. That ordinary Tuesday evening, in a hallway that smelled like her candles and a dinner we'd just finished together, was going to become the line. Before it, and after it, everything, from that point, would be measured against that moment. We had been together for 8 months at that point. 8 months of inside jokes that only made sense to us. 8 months of late-night drives and early morning texts, and me driving across town at 11 at night because she'd had a bad day and didn't want to say it directly, but I always knew. 8 months of meeting her parents. 8 months of her curling up on my couch like it was hers. 8 months of me rearranging plans, skipping things I wanted to do, building my weekends around the rhythm of being with her. 8 months of actually caring. And she told her friend I wasn't real. I didn't storm out of that hallway. I didn't confront her. I quietly set one of the coffee mugs down on the counter, kept mine, and walked back to the living room. I sat on the couch. I waited for her. And when she came out of the bedroom, smiling, phone tucked into her back pocket, I smiled back. She sat beside me and curled into my side the way she always did, like the last 10 minutes hadn't happened. Like there was no version of her that had just called me nothing serious. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "I'm good." I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. I was 27. She was 25. We met through mutual friends at a rooftop party, started texting that same night, and by month 2 we were spending almost every weekend together without either of us having to plan it. That's the setup. Everything else, you'll understand as we go. Her name was Cassie, and I need to be honest about something before I go any further, because this story only makes sense if you understand the full shape of her. She wasn't a villain. She wasn't someone who yelled or screamed or threw things. She wasn't cruel in any way you could point to directly. She was something harder to explain. She was someone whose cruelty was entirely architectural. Every choice she made was quiet. Every choice was deniable. The kind of behavior that, when you try to explain it to someone who wasn't there, makes you sound like you're overreacting. So she didn't post about you? Lots of people are private. She didn't use the word boyfriend? Maybe she's just not into labels. She told her friend you were casual? Maybe she was just downplaying it because Brooke always makes a big deal of things. I told myself every single one of those things. Because when you genuinely like someone, your brain becomes an expert at explaining away the things it doesn't want to look at directly. I had been at her apartment for about 3 hours that Tuesday evening. We'd had dinner. She'd cooked, which she liked doing. And then we'd moved to the couch to watch something, and I'd offered to make coffee because I knew she liked it after dinner. It was a good evening. The kind you don't put in any category while you're in it because it just feels normal. Her friend Brooke called, and she stepped into the bedroom. I didn't think anything of it. I made the coffee. I set both mugs on the counter. I was actually in a good mood. And then I heard her voice shift. It wasn't what she said at first. It was the shift in register. That particular kind of casual that people perform when they want to seem unbothered but are actually being very deliberate. "He's not really my boyfriend, you know." A pause. "We're just kind of hanging out. It's nothing serious. He's temporary." I heard Brooke laugh through the phone on the other side. Then Cassie laughed. She actually laughed. "Relax, Brooke. I'm not making any decisions. He's fun. That's all. Fun." I looked down at the 2 cups of coffee in my hands. I thought. I drove 2 hours in traffic to help her move furniture when her last apartment flooded. I sat in a hospital waiting room for 4 hours when her dad had a blood pressure scare. I introduced her to my mother. I remembered the name of the coworker she complained about the first week we met and still asked about him 8 months later. Fun. I walked back to the couch. I sat down. I waited for her to come out. She came out still smiling, that warm, easy smile that I had genuinely loved, and she sat next to me and tucked herself into my side. "Sorry about that," she said. "Brooke always calls at weird times." "It's fine," I said. She reached over and took her coffee. She said it smelled good. I agreed that it did. We watched the rest of whatever was on TV, and I sat there perfectly still, beside a woman who had just called me a placeholder, and I smiled at the right moments and laughed when something was funny, and I was completely, entirely fine. On the outside. Here's what I need to say now. That phone call wasn't the first sign. It was just the first one loud enough that I couldn't file it away anymore. Before that Tuesday, there had been smaller things. Things I'd collected and stored without letting myself look at them too directly. Like the fact that she'd never posted anything about me. Not a single photo. Not a mention. Not a story of us anywhere together. I hadn't pushed it because I'm not the kind of person who needs social media validation to feel like something is real. But I'd noticed. Or the way she introduced me when we were out with her friends. Just my name. No context. No title. This is, and then my name. Like I was a co-worker she'd bumped into at a cafe. Not my boyfriend. Not the guy I'm seeing. Not even something ambiguous like my person. Just a name, floating in the air, attached to nothing. I noticed that too. Or the dinner party she'd brought me to with her work colleagues. I was seated right beside her. One of her colleagues, someone I hadn't met before, had asked her directly if she was seeing anyone. And she'd said, clearly, without any hesitation, "I'm currently single, but casually dating." Single. She was sitting close enough to me that our arms were touching. I didn't react. I lifted my glass and took a sip, and I nodded along to the next sentence of the conversation like she hadn't just quietly erased me from the room. I told myself she was private. I told myself she had anxiety about commitment. I told myself a lot of things. Because I liked her. And that's what liking someone does to you when you don't want to lose them. It makes you very, very forgiving of things you shouldn't be forgiving. After the Tuesday phone call, I stopped applying the forgiving filter. Not out of anger. Not even out of hurt, exactly. I just made a decision to let myself see things clearly. And what I saw clearly was a pattern. Cassie was someone who kept herself available. Not in a calculated or wicked way. I want to be precise about that. But in a way that was so consistent and so maintained over time that it stopped being accidental. She kept her public life clean of me. She kept her private life full of me. I existed in her world the way furniture exists in a rented apartment. Fully present, useful, comfortable, and not hers. I'd found out from her friend Haley, casually during a night out a couple of months back, that both of Cassie's previous serious relationships had ended the same way. The other person had eventually given up and left. Both times. Cassie always lands on her feet, Haley had said, laughing, like this was an admirable quality. I'd laughed along. But now, sitting with a clearer view of the pattern, I thought about what it actually meant. Landing on your feet is fine. Never allowing anything to land on you is different. About 2 weeks after I heard the phone call, I brought it up. We were at my apartment on a Saturday morning. She was making toast in my kitchen. She'd always been comfortable in my space in a way that I loved. This easy ownership she had of anywhere she happened to be, and I was at the kitchen table with my coffee. "Hey," I said, "can I ask you something?" She looked over her shoulder. "Sure." I kept my voice easy, my posture loose. "When you talk to your friends about us, about what we are, what do you say?" A beat. Half a second. But I was paying attention now. "What do you mean?" she said. "I mean how you describe us. What word you use." She turned back to the toaster. "I don't know. I just say we're spending time together." "What? Do you call me your boyfriend?" A longer pause this time. The kind where you hear someone deciding how to answer rather than just answering. Labels are kind of overrated, don't you think? I set my mug down carefully. "Cassie, 8 months. I know. I'm not asking for a public announcement. I'm asking if, when your best friend asks about the person you spend basically every weekend with, you describe him as your boyfriend." She finally turned around. "I just don't want to make it into a big thing." Who said anything about a big thing? People make it into one. And then there's expectations and pressure and... "I'm not pressure," I said. "I'm the person who sat in a hospital waiting room with you for 4 hours. I'm not asking for a ring. I'm asking for a word." She softened at that. Her shoulders came down. "I know," she said. "You've been really good to me. You are important to me. I just process things slowly." "Okay," I said. "Are you upset?" I looked at her. "No," I said. "I'm not upset." And I meant it. I wasn't upset. I was something quieter than upset. I was starting to understand. Pattern interrupt. First one. 3 weeks after that kitchen conversation, I was at a gas station on a Wednesday afternoon. I ran into Adam. He was a colleague of Cassie's, Someone I'd met twice at work events she'd brought me to, friendly guy, easy to talk to. We made small talk at the pump for a minute. And then he said something that made me stop moving entirely. Hey, how's Cassie? I heard she's been seeing someone kind of seriously. Is that still a thing? I looked at him. That's me, I said. I'm the someone. He blinked. Oh, wait. Really? Yeah. 8.5 months. Something moved across his face. Not quite embarrassment. More like a realization hitting in real time. Huh, he said. She talks about you like it just started. Like it's brand new. A silence settled between us at those gas pumps. She never mentioned how long. I asked. No. Honestly, I just assumed it was someone she'd met recently. She never. He stopped. Never mind. I might be getting it wrong. It's fine, I said. Good to see you, Adam. I drove home. I sat in my parking garage for 15 minutes with the engine off. Not crying. Not panicking. Just sitting in the kind of quiet that happens when something finally becomes undeniable. Let me tell you what I felt sitting in that parking garage. Because I think it matters more than anything else in this story. I wasn't devastated. That's the honest answer. I was disappointed. But it was the kind of disappointment that comes packaged with something that almost felt like relief. Because a thing that had been blurry for months was now completely clear. All of those moments, the no photos, the vague introductions, the labels are overrated, the just spending time together, the I'm single but casually dating at that dinner party, they weren't anxiety. They weren't slow processing. They weren't commitment issues waiting to resolve. They were the architecture of a decision she'd made quietly and maintained consistently for 8 months. She had decided, probably very early on, that I was going to be temporary. And she had arranged everything around that decision. She had built the exit in advance. She had kept the door unlocked before she even needed to leave. And she just never told me. The only question left was what I was going to do with that information. Here's where most people would expect me to leave. I didn't. Not yet. I know that might seem like weakness. I want to be precise about why it wasn't. I didn't stay because I had hope. I didn't stay because I was afraid of being alone, or because I thought I could change her, or because I loved her too much to let go. I stayed because I needed to know something. I needed to know whether, given time, without me pushing or prompting or asking, she would ever, on her own, choose to make it real. There's a difference between leaving something broken and leaving something you weren't completely sure about. I was sure, but I needed to be certain. Call it a test if you want. I think of it more as a final piece of evidence. So I kept showing up. I kept being the same person I'd been for 8 months. Present, reliable, attentive. I fixed the kitchen sink when it started leaking at her place. I showed up with soup when she was sick with a cold and pretended she didn't need anything. I remembered the small things she'd mentioned once. A book she'd said she wanted to read, a restaurant she'd mentioned was good, and I showed up with those things weeks later. I was, by every measurable standard, a good partner. And Cassie, for her part, was exactly what she'd always been. Warm when I was in the room with her. Invisible when I wasn't. She'd hold my hand in my apartment and not in public. She'd text me every night before sleep, but never appear in a single image she posted. She'd say, "You know I really like having you around," and then spend the next 3 days telling the rest of her world she was essentially unattached. The two versions of Cassie were so seamlessly maintained, so practiced and consistent, that I almost had to admire the effort it took. Almost. About a month after the parking garage, I started pulling back. Quietly. No announcements. No scenes. I just started being slightly less available. Where before I had rearranged my schedule to make time for her, now I didn't. Where before I had been the one reaching out first, now I waited. I was still responsive. I wasn't ghosting her, but I was slower, more neutral, less eager. And here is the thing about people who like having you around without officially claiming you. They notice when you're less around. They just don't always know what to do with the noticing. Cassie started texting more frequently. "You free this weekend? Miss your face. What are you doing later? Come over. I'm making pasta." I responded, but shorter. Later, about 2 weeks into the shift, she called me. "Are you okay?" she said. "You seem different lately." "I'm fine." "You sure? Because you've kind of been distant." Distant. I thought about 8 months of being so present she never had to wonder where I was or whether I was coming. "I've been busy," I said. "With what?" "Work stuff. Life." A pause. "Are you mad at me about something?" "No. You can tell me if you are." "I'd rather know." "I know you would." Another pause. "So you're really okay?" "Yeah, Cassie. Okay. She trailed off. "I miss you." I held the phone for a second. "I know," I said. I didn't say it back. That was new, and I could hear it land in the silence. The way silence can carry weight. She didn't say anything for a moment. And then, okay, talk tomorrow. Sure, I said. We hung up. Pattern interrupt, second one. The moment I knew it was completely over happened on a Friday night. We were out with a group, her friends, a couple of mine, at a bar in the city. It was actually a good night in the way those nights can be. Loud and easy, music at the right volume, everyone loosened up and laughing. I was standing with a couple of people I knew when a new person joined the group. His name was Connor. Someone Haley had brought along. Friendly guy? No idea who I was. He looked at me and asked, naturally, how I knew Cassie. Before I could say a single word, Cassie appeared from nowhere. Oh, he's just a friend of mine, she said. Lightly, easily, like breathing, like she'd said it 1,000 times. Just a friend. I looked at her. She held eye contact for exactly half a second, then turned to Connor and asked where he'd been living. Just like that. The conversation moved on. I stood there with my drink in my hand. And then, quietly, without making a thing of it, I walked to the other side of the bar. I found my friend Kyle and 2 others from my side of the group, and I stood with them and I laughed at something Kyle said, and I ordered another drink, and I was completely fine. I was fine. But something had closed. The way a door closes when it's been swinging open and shut for too long, and finally someone makes a decision and it clicks shut. Not slamming. Just shut. We drove home separately that night. At midnight she texted, "Where did you go?" I didn't even get to say bye properly. I read it. I put my phone face down on my nightstand. And I went to sleep. Let me tell you something about who I was before Cassie. Not for sympathy. Not to build a case. Just because the context matters for understanding what came next. Before Cassie, I'd been in one serious relationship. Her name was Fiona. We were together for almost 2 years. It ended the way some good things end. Not with screaming, not with cheating, not with anything dramatic. She got a job offer overseas. She took it. I didn't want to try long distance for something without a visible end date, and we both understood. We still follow each other online. There's no bad feeling there. It just didn't survive the distance. After that, I'd been single for 1.5 years before Cassie. And that 1.5 years had actually been one of the better periods of my life. I got promoted. I started running seriously. I moved into my own apartment and built it into a space that actually felt like me. I figured out what I wanted from life, from work, from the kind of relationship I was willing to be in. And one of the things I decided very clearly during that time was that I was done with situations where I had to beg for acknowledgement. I had watched my father do that his entire career, pour himself into things that never claimed him back, work twice as hard for half the recognition, stay loyal to people who filed him under convenient. And I had decided, quietly, that I wasn't going to replicate that in my personal life. I wanted someone who was proud to be with me, not because of arrogance, because of basic self-respect. That was the thing I'd spent 1.5 years building. And somewhere in 8 months of being with Cassie, somewhere in the making of her coffee and the driving across town and the hospital waiting rooms and the smiling when she came out of the bedroom like I hadn't heard anything, I had traded that self-respect away in small installments. That Friday night, standing in a bar after she called me just a friend in front of a stranger, I remembered what I'd built. And I decided to be it again. I gave myself 2 more weeks. Not out of indecision. Out of respect for the process. I've never been someone who acts on emotion alone. I wanted to think clearly, be certain I was making the decision for the right reasons and not just because one night in a bar had stung. I thought about whether I should sit her down and explain everything. Tell her what I'd heard. Tell her what Adam had said. Tell her what it had felt like to stand there while she filed me under nobody for the 100th time. And then I realized something. She already knew what she was doing. She didn't need me to narrate it back to her. She had been making those choices consciously, continuously, for 8 months. The only thing a big conversation would accomplish was giving her the opportunity to explain it away and talk me back into the same position. I'd made the right call. On a Wednesday evening, she texted me, "What are you up to tonight?" I typed back, "Hey, I've been doing some thinking. I think we should stop seeing each other." She called within 40 seconds. I let it ring. She called again. I texted, "I'm not trying to be cold. I just think this has run its course. Take care of yourself, Cassie." Her messages came fast after that. "What? Where is this coming from? Can we please talk about this? I don't understand. Did something happen? Are you seriously not going to answer me?" I read them all. Every one. And then I put my phone in the kitchen drawer and went and cooked dinner. That night was not easy. I need to say that because I don't want this story to sound like I was made of stone. I sat at my kitchen table alone, and I thought about everything that had been good about Cassie. And there was a lot. Her laugh. One of the genuinely best laughs I have ever heard from another human being. The way she got completely lit up about documentaries, like she couldn't contain the information fast enough. How she'd steal my hoodies and then claim with complete sincerity that they didn't fit, even when they obviously did. The night we'd sat in her car outside a diner in the rain until almost 4 a.m. just talking, not about anything important, just talking, and time had stopped making noise. Those things were real. I wasn't pretending they hadn't happened. I wasn't rewriting the history to make the leaving easier. But real moments can exist inside a broken pattern and still not fix it. She had built me into something temporary. So I decided to be exactly that. I just made sure I was done on my own terms. She sent messages for 3 days. I read each one and responded to none. On day 4 she sent one that said, "You owe me a conversation. We spent 8 months together." I read that one twice. I thought about how those 8 months had been carefully kept invisible to anyone in her life who might ask questions. And I put the phone in the drawer again. On day 6, she stopped. The first month after I left was quiet in a way I hadn't expected. Not painful quiet, just spacious. I'd been so used to the rhythms of being with her. The Sunday check-ins, the Wednesday evenings, the constant low-level awareness of fitting my life around another person's, that having all that space back felt strange before it felt good. I filled it intentionally. I went back to the gym more seriously than I had in over a year. I called my friend Kyle, someone I'd been close to in college and had drifted from during the Cassie period, and we ended up at a sports bar watching a game for 4 hours straight. It was the most uncomplicated I'd felt in months. No reading between lines. No managing tone. No wondering where I stood. Just sitting with a friend and watching a game. Work picked up. I got assigned to a project I actually cared about. For the first time in a while, I was showing up energized rather than already tired. My apartment started feeling like mine again. I know that sounds like a small thing. It wasn't. When you're half-orbiting someone else's life, your own space starts to feel like a waiting room. It started feeling like home. I'll be honest, there were nights in that first month where I questioned myself. Not whether I should go back. That thought never landed. But whether I'd handled it right. Whether the big conversation would have been better. Whether she deserved the chance to explain. And then I'd come back to the same truth every time. She didn't need me to tell her what she'd been doing. She knew every line she'd said to every person. She knew what she'd built. She knew what I wasn't, publicly, for 8 months. The only thing a conversation would have changed was giving her the chance to reframe it until I believed it was something other than what it was. I'd made the right call. Pattern interrupt, third one. About 6 weeks after the breakup, I got a message from Haley. Not Cassie. Haley. Hey, I know this is probably weird. Just wanted to see how you were doing. I stared at it for a moment. Then I replied, "I'm doing well. Thanks for reaching out." She wrote back, "For what it's worth, I always thought you were genuinely one of the good ones. I'm sorry it ended the way it did." I thanked her. Then I asked, "Is Cassie okay?" She took a minute. Then, "She's processing." I didn't write back after that, but I thought about that word. Processing. Like what had happened was something external. Something that had come at her from outside the story she'd written. Not something she'd built, brick by brick, for 8 months. I closed the chat and went back to my evening. 2 months out, I was genuinely okay. Not performatively okay. Not the kind of okay that posts sunsets and healing era captions. Quietly, privately, actually okay. Sleeping well. Eating well. A weekend trip with Kyle and a couple others from college was on the calendar. 3 days at a cabin, hiking, cooking, no agenda. I was building something that was just mine. 3 months after we'd ended, I ran into Cassie. I hadn't planned for it. I was at a coffee shop on a Sunday morning, laptop open, working through some project notes. She walked through the door. We saw each other at exactly the same moment. There was no natural way to avoid it. She looked good. She always looked good. But what I noticed first wasn't her appearance. It was her expression. She looked startled. Not the kind of startled you are when you bump into someone unexpectedly. The kind you are when you bump into someone you haven't stopped thinking about. "Hey," she said. "Hey. This is weird." "A little bit, yeah." She glanced at the counter, then back at me. "Do you want to sit for a minute?" "If you're not." "Sure," I said. "I'm not someone who runs." We sat across from each other. She wrapped both hands around her mug in that way she always had. For someone who had always seemed so naturally comfortable everywhere she went, she looked genuinely uncertain. Like she had reached for a script and found the page blank. "You look good," she said. "Thanks." "You look different." "Different how?" She thought about it for a moment. Like you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Like you're not waiting for anything. I didn't say anything to that. She looked at her mug. I've been thinking about you a lot, she said. I held my coffee. That's natural. It takes time after something ends. No, I mean more than that. She stopped. I think about that last text you sent me. I think about what I did wrong. She caught herself. I think I took you for granted. I looked at her. She looked back. And I noticed something. I felt nothing. Not coldness. Not satisfaction. Not sadness. Nothing. The kind of nothing that isn't emptiness but completion. Like looking at a chapter you've already finished, understood, and moved on from. I think you made a choice, I said carefully. A lot of small ones, consistently, over a long time. And they added up. I know. And then I made one. She nodded slowly. Are you happy? She asked. I thought about that honestly. Yeah, I said. I think I actually am. Something crossed her face. Not exactly hurt. Recognition. Like she was seeing, for the first time, clearly, the shape of what she decided to not hold. I used to tell people you were temporary, she said quietly. I know. She looked up. How? I heard you. On the phone with Brooke. That first time. I was in the hallway. Her expression shifted. You knew? You never. I know I didn't. Why? I took a sip of my coffee. Because I wanted to see what you do on your own. Without me prompting you. Without me pushing. She stared at me. And what did I do? You kept doing the same thing. She pressed her lips together. Nodded once, slowly, like she was confirming something to herself more than to me. I kept doing the same thing, she said quietly. Can I ask you something? She said. Go ahead. Did you ever actually believe I was serious about you? Or did you know the whole time this wasn't going anywhere? I thought about that for a real moment. I believed you were serious about what we had when we were alone in a room together. I just didn't believe you were serious about me outside of that room. She inhaled slowly. That's a really specific distinction. You were specific about it. A silence opened. Connor asked me out, she said. The guy from the bar. Yeah. And? She shook her head. I said no. I didn't even want to. I just kept thinking about, I don't know, about everything. About how I'd handled things. I didn't fill the silence. I think I had something real and I stored it in the temporary file, she said. Because I was scared. Okay. That's all you're going to say? What do you want me to say, Cassie? She looked at me directly. Something. Anything. Tell me you're still angry. Tell me I ruined it. Tell me there's something still there. I set my mug down. You didn't ruin anything, I said. You showed me what you wanted me to be. And I was okay with it for a while. And then I wasn't. That's the whole story. Do you still feel anything? Honestly, I held that question for a second. I feel like I'm talking to someone I used to know very well, I said. She looked like that hit her somewhere deep. Maybe because it was kind. Maybe because it was final. Probably because it was both at the same time. I found out later, through Haley, who reached out a couple of weeks after that coffee shop conversation, that Cassie had been talking about me a lot. To her therapist. To her friends. To Haley specifically, on multiple occasions. She'd gone back through the entire timeline of what she'd done, apparently. Reconstructed it. Haley said Cassie had realized she'd kept me labeled as temporary as a kind of protection. If she never publicly claimed me, she could never publicly lose me. If nobody knew about us, nobody could watch it fall apart. She'd built the exit first because she was terrified of being left. She'd arranged it all so that if I ever went, she could say it was nothing. She was fine. It wasn't serious anyway. She'd built a story where she couldn't be hurt. And in doing so, she had ensured I would eventually go. And then I had actually gone. And the nothing she'd constructed, the temporary, the just hanging out, the just a friend, turned out to be the thing she couldn't move past. The thing she was still sitting with months later. I didn't feel triumphant about that. I want to be honest about that. There was no satisfaction in it. It was just sad the way a lot of human things are sad. Someone so afraid of being left that they leave first. Someone so certain loss is coming that they arrange it themselves. And then being startled when the loss is real. For months after the breakup, I was in the mountains. That trip with Kyle and the others. 3 days of hiking and cooking and staying up later than was reasonable, talking about nothing and everything. On the second night, I was outside on the porch while the others were still inside, sitting in the dark and listening to the trees. Kyle came out and sat next to me. You good? Yeah. Just thinking. About Cassie? I thought about it honestly. Not really. More about what I want. What I'm actually looking for. Which is someone who introduces me as her person. Without hesitating. Without managing the impression. Without the exit door already built. Kyle took a drink from his bottle. That's not asking for a lot, he said. No, I said. It really isn't. We sat there a while. The trees were dark and completely still. You seem different than you've been in a while, Kyle said. Lighter. Yeah, I am, I said. And I meant every word of it. About 5 months after the breakup, Haley messaged me again. Cassie is seeing someone new. I thought you'd want to know, in case it came up. I wrote back. That's good. I hope it goes well for her. Haley said. She cried when she told me. She said she keeps comparing him to you. She said she can't figure out why she can't be present in it. I read that. I thought about that phrase. Can't be present in it. And I thought about how that was probably the truest description of Cassie anyone had offered across this entire story. She'd never been fully present with me either. She'd been half there and half managing the impression of someone who was unattached. And now she was trying to figure out how to be present with someone new. And the thing standing in the way was someone she'd called temporary. The person she'd filed under nothing serious had become the most serious thing she was carrying. The one she'd refused to claim publicly had become the one she couldn't stop claiming in her mind. I wrote back to Haley. I hope she figures it out. I really do mean that. I closed the chat, and I went back to my evening. 6 months after leaving Cassie, I met someone. I'm not going to turn this into a neat love story ending, because that would miss the point. But I'll tell you one thing. On the third date, the third one, she introduced me to her best friend. We hadn't even used the word boyfriend yet. She just said, "This is my person." Simple, certain, no hesitation, no vagueness, no exit door pre-built behind the words. Just my person. And something in my chest that I hadn't realized was still faintly clenched. Some small piece of 8 months that I'd thought I'd let go but hadn't entirely, finally released. I think about that Tuesday evening sometimes. Standing in Cassie's hallway with 2 mugs of coffee, hearing the sentence through the wall. And I think about the version of me who walked back to the couch and smiled and said, yeah, I'm fine. He was trying so hard. He was also quietly breaking something he didn't know he'd built. The habit of making someone else's comfort the ceiling above his own worth. It took a few more months to finish that break, but he got there. People ask me sometimes what I'd have done differently. The honest answer is, not much. I might not have stayed as long after I heard that phone call, but I needed to see it clearly before I could leave it cleanly. And those extra weeks gave me exactly that. Not hope, certainty, the kind that doesn't waver later. Cassie and I don't talk. We have the kind of social media connection that's just the quiet acknowledgement that things ended without explosions. I see her posts sometimes. She's living her life. She's doing all right. I don't hold anything against her. But I also don't pretend the pattern wasn't what it was. Some people are extraordinarily skilled architects of their own emotional escape routes. And when you truly see that in someone, when you finally understand the blueprint, the kindest thing for everyone involved is to walk through the door they've already built. Let them have their narrative, and build your own. She made me temporary. She arranged her whole life around that decision. She told Brooke. She told her coworkers. She told Connor. She told anyone who asked and some who didn't. She called me nothing serious. She called me just a friend. She filed me under, for now, in every category that mattered. And when I finally agreed with her, when I finally became exactly what she designed me to be, she spent the next 6 months finding out that temporary things can become permanent in a way nobody plans for. Not in her life. In her head. She was the one still in that hallway. Not me. She made me temporary. I made myself unforgettable. And the difference is, she's the one who still knows it.